All right, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Ryan Chapman. I'm the author of SANS Forensics 528, Ransomware and Cyber Extortion, and I also teach Forensics 610, Reverse Engineering Malware. Security awareness is very important to the ransomware landscape because so many times the threat actors abuse things that users might do. And so we want to go over what the heck is ransomware? What is it? Why is it a threat? How does it evolve? That kind of thing. And then also go over some tips and tricks as we go throughout for your security awareness programs, whether they be developed in-house firsthand or whether they're third party and whatnot. So let's see if I can advance this little guy. There you go. So first and foremost, how bad is ransomware? Like what's the scourge really become? This is a screenshot of my SANS range that we were using to develop a course on ransomware that ended up being ransomed while we were developing the course. So I set up the range and we were going to have our red team come in and do the adversary emulation stuff the next morning. I slept for maybe 6 hours and I left the range in a, let's just say, not the most pristine security state on purpose, because I thought, gosh, it would be funny if a threat actor came in just to do like whatever. But then we carried out the ransomware and we would have like some noise, Well, I woke up and the range was ransomed, and this was not us. This was a ransomware actor who, within 6 hours, obtained access to our range and did the bad things that we actually wanted to teach about. So we thought, well, that's cute. Just give an example of how bad things can really get. 6 hours in an insecure state, and we already have a problem. So what's the problem? What is ransomware? Well, first and foremost, when we refer to the term ransomware these days, what we're referring to is the overall attack campaign. We're not just talking about the ransomware malware itself. That comes at the very end. You have all the stuff that happens, and then eventually, boop, that's when the actual ransomware encryptor, or what we call a payload, runs. There's also what we now call cyber extortion, which is where everything that's carried out occurs, but rather the ransomware payload itself is not executed within the environment. So typically what this consists of is getting into the environment, moving around laterally, escalating privileges, doing all the things they need to do to get access to all the things they want, stealing all of that data out, and then just leaving. So in those cases, a cyber extortion incident is basically a ransomware incident, but there's no actual ransomware. There is a ransom, there will be ransom notes. If you want your data and you don't want it to be exposed to the public, you have to pay us, but the machines won't actually go offline. They won't be encrypted. So for payloads over time, we've had lockers, which just lock the computer up and stop users from being able to use them. We've had full disk encryptors where the entire disk is encrypted, but these days we typically deal with file encryptors, where the files on the system themselves will be encrypted. And keep in mind that when you lock down a resource by locking a ton of files on the system, it will typically cause the services that that system provides to go down. That can be Active Directory, which is the backbone of the entire network. That can be something as simple as a software distribution platform. It can be your backup environment. It can be all the things you don't want to be unavailable, especially if you have to respond to something like this. Ransomware started out in the medical field. I know, horrible, right? A note about that on the next screen. We started seeing a lot of like fake antivirus lockers. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here an example of one that basically says, hey, you need to send us some Bitcoin, or we're basically going to start destroying files on this computer, or we're going to outright destroy the key that we used to encrypt the files, meaning that you won't be able to decrypt the files. And it wasn't until around 2016, which Kaspersky actually referred to as the year of ransomware, where things got really bad. And that's when threat actors realized, instead of just sending in like a phishing email and having someone do what I call a silly click on something like boop, boop, oopsie, and take down a single machine, what if we come into the environment, we navigate throughout the environment, and then we deploy the malware, the payload, the ransomware encryptor all throughout the environment? And that's where things really started to get ugly. It's sometimes referred to as semi-automated ransomware. It's not fully automated, but rather a human being behind a keyboard is responsible for the attack. Here we have the first example of ransomware. This was known as the AIDS Trojan, also known as the PC Cyborg Corporation, or PC Cyborg Trojan is what it was called. This came on floppy disks, and I'm talking, look on the right-hand side of the screen there, like floppy, right? 5 1/4 floppy disks. Some of you out there are going, what's that? And some of you who are my age are like, yeah, floppy disks. So this was an attack that occurred following the 1989 World Health Organization Summit on AIDS Research, HIV and AIDS research. So the mailing list for this convention got out, and this particular threat actor, whose name I don't like to mention because I don't want him to have any more fame than he already does, decided to send these floppy disks out. And the floppy disks installed a program that truly helped catalog and like maintain your research in the HIV and AIDS sector. But after a certain number of days, typically is around 30 days, or actually boots of the computer system, I should say, around 30. There was a couple different versions, but 30 was the most common. You would get this message that pops up on the screen. And it basically just said, hey, you have to send us X amount of money. You have to send it in a money order, and you have to send it on over to Panama. And if they didn't do that, then oops. A lot of people back then were not backing up their systems. This is 1990, right? I mean, this is a long time ago. And so what happened is a lot of people just formatted their computers, and they lost years and years of research. And this was considered to be the first version of ransomware. Microsoft in 2020 coined the term human-operated ransomware. And that's when we moved away from fully automated to semi-automated. Basically, the threat actors realize that if they get into the environment and they move around as much as they possibly can, they gain access to all the resources they can, and then lock down / encrypt all that stuff, that they could have a much bigger impact and a better probability to receive proceeds, essentially, right? Bitcoin payments. At the time, Bitcoin had kind of taken over as the payment method. Or I should say cryptocurrency. At the time, it was Bitcoin. Now it's a mix of Bitcoin and Monero and some others, but those are the main ones. The whole ransomware as a service thing that started around this time also, maybe a year or two prior, 2018-ish, made things really bad. So rather than having to know how to develop ransomware, like actually type the code out, right? These threat actors realized, wait a minute, what if we, not me, but what if we, I'm the malware developer threat actor right now in this situation. What if I make the malware, but then I just lease it out to a bunch of different people, and I let them go do all the hard work? And when they encrypt the environments, then we share the proceeds. This opened the door to what's known as an affiliate program. An affiliate program, if you see it right in the middle of the screen here, it's very similar to multi-level marketing, right? Or as you might call it, a pyramid scheme. But oddly enough, the funds typically went down towards the bottom more so than the top. So you'll see a 30-70 split over on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And what these threat actors are doing is realizing I can really entice people to take my ransomware and put it in all these different organizations. They can make 70%. But I mean, if I've got tens or hundreds of people doing that, the 30% that I'm getting is going to really stack up to a lot of money. And it made it trivial for people who don't know how to write ransomware, that program development stuff, right? The hard stuff, to just get into the game, or unfortunately to the business. And that's what it is. It's a business. And that's exactly how it operates today. Here's an example of the business. On the left-hand side, you see the ransomware developers, the few developers. We have two here. And then you have the affiliates kind of in the middle. And the affiliates are the ones that are carrying out the actual attacks on the victim organizations. The affiliates they don't have to know how to write malware, or how to write ransomware, or how to build the infrastructure for the command and control communications, or for any of the crazy advanced stuff. All they need to know how to do is get into a victim environment, deploy the ransomware, and then they all split the profits, basically. This is a business, and I mean that to the nth degree. There are different roles, and you can see all the different roles on the screen here. One of them is the initial access broker. Their entire job is just to get into networks and then sell that access, or to hand it off to the next person in their particular team, who will then act as the ransomware affiliate. The ransomware affiliate, their job is to basically navigate through the environment once they get access to that environment and get access to all the things they can get access to. You have data managers, and their whole job is basically to look at the data that comes out from the affiliates that gets exfiltrated, as we call it, or just, stolen, basically. And they catalog it, they tag it, they say, this is HR data, this is public relations data, this is PII, this is PHI, this is so on and so forth. And their job is to find the stuff that's going to work the best for that team to extort the victim, basically. You have the ransomware operator right in the middle, and their job is to basically keep that malware running and to keep the infrastructure up. You have negotiators, and their job is after the bad things have happened, they then negotiate payment. And they're usually cutthroat. They're usually knee-jerk reactionary, if you will. They are not fun to communicate with. I've talked to many different negotiators on our side, the Royal Blue Team side, and communicating with these threat actors and these negotiators is never a fun thing. You have chasers, and their job is, we have a little fist right there for the graphic here, and their job is literally to chase the victim into paying. And so they will put pressure on the victim organizations in a number of different ways, which we'll talk about very shortly. And then you have the accountant, and their job is to move the money around and to basically try to funnel the money in and out. They do what's called laundering of the Bitcoins and things of that nature to try to make it untraceable and trackable, that kind of thing. Initial access brokers. I have this slide. It's a little detailed, but I'll just tell you right now, there's a massive group of individuals out there, threat actors, who all they try to do is get into victim organizations. And that's where security awareness really comes into play. These are the folks we're mostly kind of worried about, because they're the ones who want to get into the organizations that you're trying to train on how to protect themselves, right? They're using publicly available sites. The screenshot here, without going into too much detail, at one point in time, a publicly available tool that costs $5 a year to use, or actually I got a lifetime account for $5, called Shodan. It just ran a search during one of my classes. Actually, one of my students did. And they were like, how many port 3389s are open on the internet? Well, that's remote desktop protocol. Microsoft provides that protocol in order to remotely connect to machines and do administrative tasks and use resources and applications and whatever. And the response back was 4.4 million. They're just widely open out there on the internet, just waiting to be brute forced or to have passwords stuffed into them to try to get access, basically. This image here is, it's not meant for you to see everything, obviously, because you can't see everything. There's just too much. The whole point of this graphic is to show that it's such an immersive world that these initial access brokers have. They try to get in via phishing, via RDP, via VPN services, via, like, you name it. What ways can someone get into your network legitimately? They're going to try to use that method to get into it illegitimately. And that's where security awareness also comes into play, which we're going to be talking about in more detail for tips and tricks for everyone who's watching now. Ransomware is an ever-evolving creature. It is very rare that a ransomware group just goes away. They don't go away. Rather, what they do is they rebrand, or they splinter into multiple subgroups. If there's too much heat from, example, like law enforcement, there's been a number of takedowns over the years, then they just rebrand and they restart and do things under a different moniker or a different brand, basically. Here's an example of that happening. I don't think I can zoom in on the screen directly here, and I know that the text is a little small, so I'll just explain kind of briefly here. Back in 2017, there was ransomware called Hermes. When they got taken down, when they got too much heat, they turned into a group called Ryuk. When the same happened to them, they turned into a group called Conti. When Conti basically split up after they were leaked, someone from the inside leaked out all their secrets and details and software and training programs and all kinds of stuff. And wow, it's a treasure trove of exactly how this business operates. Instead of just going away, they just decided to splinter into numerous other groups, eventually becoming Royal, eventually becoming Black Suit and Akira, which are two of the largest groups that are operating right now. The point of this is just to show that these ransomware groups, these operators and these affiliates, they don't just disappear. They just basically move on, rebrand, and go at it. So what are the types of extortion? Well, starting in 2019, a group called Maze, like you traverse a maze, right? They ended up creating what's known as the Maze Cartel, where they joined up with a bunch of other groups, but they did so because they had the idea, what if we not only encrypt the systems, but we steal data out and then use that as a method to basically extort the victim? And that's what you have right in the middle of the screen here, data exfiltration. They're the ones that essentially made that popular. I don't believe they were the first group to do it. There's kind of arguments in the industry as to who exactly was the first, but they're the ones who made it popular. So the idea of stealing your data and then also holding that over your head. So A, do you want to get your systems back online so you can just function as a business, right? That's data encryption. But then data exfiltration is, by the way, we stole a bunch of your stuff. And if you don't want the world to have that, either via just releasing it publicly, like for free, which many of them do if victims don't pay, or by selling it on the darknet to groups who might want it for quite nefarious reasons, right? Then you need to pay us. And then there's multi-extortion, which you see over there on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is where the chasers really put the pressure on the victims to basically pay up. So they'll carry out DDoS attacks where they basically bring down websites and further impact the organization and the business from, well, doing business. They'll contact suppliers, they'll contact board members, they'll contact VIPs, they'll contact joint ventures, they'll contact clients and like large clients and customers, all the above, in an effort to basically force that victim into saying, all right, well, I guess we better pay or else this is all downhill. Right? Here's an example of a typical life cycle, for a ransomware operation. On the left-hand side, this is from CERT New Zealand, by the way, credit where credit is due. On the left-hand side of the screen here, we have the initial access. You'll see phishing, exploit vulnerabilities, email with malicious attachments, things of that nature. Once they get into the environment, and that's typically the role of the initial access broker, keep that in mind, then in the middle here, we have command and control. That's the first bubble or circle. I would call it a circle instead of a bubble that's in there. And what they do is they basically try to implant software onto the initial machine they get access to in order for them to be able to send commands back and forth and have connectivity should the machine shut down, reboot, user logs out, whatever, right? Then they try to move around laterally and escalate their privileges. So if they come in as user A, but user A is not an admin, well, then they want to try to get over to user B, who's an admin within the environment. And if they can get to that, then they want to move to user C, who is a enterprise admin and Active Directory, which runs the entire network. So they're trying to utilize tools that are built into Windows and tools they bring in into those machines where they first have command and control in order to facilitate greater access to the environment. Eventually, what are they going to do? Over on the right-hand side, they're going to steal data, destroy backups, and then if it's cyber extortion, they'll stop there and just get out. They'll bounce, if you will. But if they're going to deploy a payload, they'll do that. The machines all become encrypted. Nothing is usable. And now it becomes a do we pay or do we not pay type of situation. So this, I'm just leaving this in here in case we provide the PDFs to everyone. I'm not going to go over this. This is highly detailed, a lot of stuff all over. Just pointing out that what you're seeing here was built, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago by a buddy of mine named Alan Liska for one of his books. He has a free book on ransomware, by the way. You can go to FOR528.com/book and get his book for free PDF. You can buy it on Amazon or just go get the free one. But he talks about all the tools and methodologies that are utilized. This has not changed in 7 years. We still see the same darn tools being deployed over and over and over and over. And it's aggravating how successful it is when very little has changed in so many years. And now we're going to start to get to very specific security awareness stuff. So how are these threat actors getting in? Well, according to Coveware, this article was posted, did I put the date on there? It was in 2024, right? End of first quarter. I think they just posted a new one. But remote desktop protocol, phishing, and vulnerabilities are some of the primary ways these threat actors are getting in. Well, let's talk about those. Remote desktop protocol. Well, first off, what is it? It's a protocol that Microsoft provides and has provided for I don't know how many years now in order to remotely connect to a machine in order to use it, right? Well, for security awareness, how does that really cause, how can you actually help your clients with not running into this? The last bullet point on the bottom left-hand side, shadow IT. When people bring in devices and connect them to the network, they're not under the purview or the control of IT basically. And they might have things like RDP open to the internet. And they might have poor passwords, which is what you see over on the right-hand side that way. So you see that we have password sprays, credential stuffing, credential harvesting, yada, yada, yada. What does that boil down to? In your security awareness programs, you're training about adhering to security policies, right? One of those big ones should be not sharing passwords between disparate systems. Your work password, your work passwords should all be unique, and they should not be shared with things like social media and things of that nature. Because if a third-party website, social media or otherwise, has a breach, they'll try to take those passwords and go, oh, wait a minute, Ryan had a, let's just say, Facebook account. Here's his password. I wonder if his corporate password is the same, and that's called credential stuffing. They'll try to just drop that in there, right? And another thing that you have to be very careful of these days is info stealers. A lot of people like to save their passwords in their browser. No, don't let them do that. In your security awareness programs, in your SA stuff, please train not to store passwords in the browser, but to use a proper password manager. Depending on your organization, you may have an approved one, you may not have an approved one, but it's still very important. Next up, we have the fact that another way to get into organizations that is becoming even more and more used per the codeware diagram we just saw a couple slides back here are software vulnerabilities. So your users and your security awareness training should basically be told when you see a pop-up that says IT needs to patch this software and they go, nah, or they say later, or they say, I don't want to deal with that, right? They're causing potential problems that could lead to ransomware. In addition to that, it also goes back to bringing systems into the environment or onto the network. They're not controlled by IT and that might have software that's vulnerable is a huge no-no. And we've seen that many times. We've seen employees just bring a laptop in, see an open Ethernet port and go boop, right, and plug into the network. So be very careful about that. Make sure you're training folks not to bring in random software into the environment also. If you need software, you should be requesting it from your IT organization per whatever established process, right? I have one. I needed a program for screenshots. And so instead of just going and buying one myself that could then potentially not be updated because IT has no idea it's there, right? They're not patching it and things of that nature. I went to my IT group and I requested it. And they said, here's the version. It's under our control. It'll be updated by us. And I said, okay. And I just used it. Another thing here, of course, is phishing. Now, I know that in general, at a security awareness summit, saying you should be training phishing stuff. Duh, Ryan. We're all aware of that. Okay, some of the things that groups are not doing is they're not blocking certain file types that might come in that are known to be nefarious. So if you go to filesec.io, there's a list of different file types. In your security awareness, you can say, don't send these file types. And then from the IT side, right, of your security training, it should be block these types within your email security gateway. Another thing they do is they include links in the phishing emails. Many times people fall for the fact that some of these links will look legitimate. It'll go to Dropbox or Box or Google Drive or Microsoft Azure or whatever. And they'll go, oh, that's a good site. That's everyone knows Google Drive. And they'll go, boop, and they'll click on it. No, you don't want your users to be clicking on file sharing sites and downloading files that are linked from emails. So keep in mind, not only talking about how to recognize malicious emails, but also pointing out that any file sharing site whatsoever can be used for malicious purposes. And that's what a lot of these threat actors are moving towards. So if you go to LOTS, if you just Google LOTS or go to FOR528.com/LOTS, stands for Living Off Trusted Sites. And it'll give you a bunch of different sites so you can kind of integrate into your training to be like, hey, If you see secure file or we share or share file in an email, don't just think, oh, I've heard of this file sharing program. It's okay to click. It's not. Stop it. And then we end off with two different things. There are two different realms here that I think are very important for SA programs that I'm not seeing a lot. First and foremost, if you're using MFA, multi-factor authentication within your environments, you don't want to use text message or what's known as SMS authentication. You want to use an app on your phone. You want to use some type of app that requires the app to open, send a notification, and even better, asks for some numbers that are shown on the screen in order to enter them. Reason being is that SIM swapping is very popular these days. SIM swapping, all phones, even my Verizon phone here, it goes into the side, have a SIM. And the SIM, S-I-M, is where my account is contained. So I can call up my mobile provider and I can say, hey, I have a new phone or I got a new SIM card and I want to swap it over. They'll verify me, and their verification processes these days, maybe not the best, but threat actors can also do that. So what you can have people do in your security awareness programs, and it's listed on the bottom of the screen here, should have made that text a little bigger. That's all right. Have them call their mobile providers and ask them to set a password or to restrict swaps or activations. Now, that's not going to stop the SIM swappers that are paying off employees, because those employees will just do whatever they want. But just be very, very careful of any type of SIM swaps and things like emails like new SIM activated on your account. That should be something folks are aware of. If they see that, they need to immediately call their mobile provider, because someone is trying to take over their phone, and they're probably trying to do that to get authenticated into some systems that they have access to. And the last guy here is be very wary of what's known as SEO poisoning, but even more important, fake ads should be discussed in your SA programs. Fake ads are leading to info stealers, which are eventually leading to stage 1 and stage 2 malware, which are leading to ransomware. When you Google something, or if you Bing something, if you're a Binger, that's fine with me, I guess. But whatever you're searching up, when you see sponsored right above the link and you go, oh, okay, boop, and you click on it, that's a sponsored ad. And those ads are trivial to purchase. So it's very important that your users are aware that just because they see sponsored up at the top, it doesn't mean it's legitimate. In fact, it can mean it's illegitimate. So using bookmarks to access sites versus clicking links wherever they might be, especially in email, and using password managers can really help your users. Let's say there's an ad that's malicious and they click on the ad and it takes them to a login page, and their password manager is like, I don't have a password for that site. And they're like, why not? This is my site. The password manager is intelligent enough to know that's not the right site. Don't go to that site. So password managers, again, can be very, very useful to mention in your SA programs. And of course, looking at domain names and things of that nature. All right, that's all I had for today. I think we're right on time here. I will jump into the Summit Slack and I'll answer questions there, because I don't think we have any time for questions. If anyone wants to contact me, I'm at RJ_Chap on Twitter. If you want to learn more about ransomware, I would love to take a course from SANS on ransomware. That would be my guy, Forensics 528, Ransomware and Cyber Extortion. And thank you all for having me. I think security awareness is extremely important to help thwart the threat of ransomware. And folks like you that are watching now are the ones that really make that happen in organizations around the world. So it's very much appreciated you took the time to watch my presentation.